Good afternoon, everyone. Michelle Quesada here with WPTV News Channel 5. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And we are talking about the big announcement that came out today. Pfizer saying that its vaccine trials for 5 to 11-year-olds is going well and shows safe results. So big headline today coming out of Pfizer's trial for those children 5 to 11 years old. I want to welcome Dr. Shannon Fox Levine with Palm Beach Pediatrics. Dr. Fox, thank you so much for joining us. We've talked to you many times about COVID-19 in children, as well as the vaccine in children 12 and up. So we obviously would love to chat with you on your perspective of this big announcement today.
Yes, it's exciting. We were hopeful that the timing was going to be just as it is. So it's finally, the parents who have been very worried about sending their kids to school, at least in this age group, the 5 to 11-year-olds, which again is the rest of the school-age children, kindergarten through the early middle school years who have not been able to get vaccinated yet. The worries hopefully will settle down now that this is looming on the horizon, at least. We have to still wait, obviously, for the emergency use authorization by the FDA. But the information from Pfizer today is very promising.
And I just want to remind our viewers, ask your questions. This is a discussion that we're having about the Pfizer vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, and that the trial is in phase 2 out of 3 and showing promising results with the antibodies. Dr. Fox, I'm sure you've gotten many questions from parents, from kids under 12 about when this vaccine may be available. Mm-hmm. We know that first, the studies have to be published by Pfizer until they're submitted to the FDA. I know that it could take weeks after that happens. Do you expect by the end of the year that we might see a vaccine for children 5 to 11?
Oh, yes, I'm optimistic. The reports look like, maybe by even as early as Halloween, that we may have that emergency use authorization. And, what's important to remember is that for children, as pediatricians, we learn how to dose things based on weight. So that's why this has taken longer for the younger children, because the appropriate dose needed to be evaluated. And from what Pfizer has released, it is a third of the dose that is for the 12 and older children at this point, that has shown to be safe and effective. And effective meaning that it's giving the body the same immune response that it needs to protect itself against hospitalization and death from coronavirus at those same levels as the 12 and older at the higher dose.
And I'm glad you bring that up about the dosage, because one of the things I read on the FDA's website today was for parents to make sure they know that once this is, this emergency use authorization does come through for that age group, that doesn't mean that kids are going out and getting the vaccine that us adults are getting, or that those 12 and up are getting. Melissa had a question about, and we kind of touched on this, how soon will it be ready? And will it be different doses for even different kids within this age group of 5 to 11?
No, the way that the vaccines, across the board, how vaccines are studied, or they're studied in the age ranges that, because that would be hard, right, for every age to get a different dose. So within age ranges that they can study from the 5 to 11-year-old age range to show that it is safe and effective for one dose for us as pediatricians to know to give. The children less than 5, the 2 to 5-year-olds, will likely have a different dose, and then the less than 2. And again, we're familiar with this with other vaccines that we give, like flu vaccine. That's different doses for different age groups.
And Emily's asking, for those younger than 5 years old, do you think this will be a situation where next year we may have more information? Have the trial studies even begun for anyone younger than 5?
Yes, the trials are being done, but until Pfizer can generate their, data to report that it's safe and effective in that clinical trial, then it's hard to know. And until that happens, I mean, it could be anyone's guess when and if it may happen. That's the first step, is needing to see that data supports the use in the younger children.
Tanisha has a great question. What about children with autoimmune issues and type 1 diabetes? I imagine the vaccine will be available to all children at once. We won't see like a phase in like how we did with adults, but you can answer more. Dr. Fox, will it be recommended for children with those types of situations?
Yes, it will, as it has been for the 12 and older, the people with medical conditions that make them more at risk of becoming very ill from coronavirus are those that are, have been the top of the list to get the vaccine. We have enough vaccine at this point that I think that it will probably be released as it was to the 12 to 15-year-olds, just on a, first come, first serve type of basis. I don't think that it will be broken down by, risk factors, that those more at high risk should get it first. But again, could be wrong. A lot of this is us just knowing what we've already done and what seems like it has worked, and moving forward, then just waiting for our direction from the CDC and the FDA.
And Tanisha's beating me to all my questions. So who shouldn't have it? Dr. Fox, is there any child in your care, that certain scenarios where you think you might recommend them not getting the vaccine?
Really, at this point, it's only anyone who's had a severe reaction to one of the vaccines. So if you get the first one and you have a severe reaction, like an allergic reaction, then those are the people who wouldn't qualify to get a second dose or a dose in the future if there was like a booster eventually. So at this point, it's safe and effective across all medical conditions. It's, we've given it to even very immunocompromised patients because, again, they are at the highest risk of getting very sick from coronavirus. And the concern there is usually more, is the vaccine going to be effective? Because they're the people with low immune response. Well, they may not respond as they should to the vaccine to keep them from getting sick from it. And that's why, the recent guideline is for that booster, the emergency use authorization for the anyone with an immunocompromised age group.
Melissa brings up a great point. She's saying that her son just had his flu shot yesterday, and she's asking if there's any issue getting this vaccine at the end of October when it comes out. I imagine there will be some restrictions or guidelines on how soon you can receive another vaccine. I know this is right around flu season as well, if kids get their flu shot and then expect to get the COVID-19 vaccine shortly thereafter.
Actually, there isn't at this point any contraindication of doing them back to back. Today get your flu shot, tomorrow get your coronavirus COVID vaccine. We've been doing that. We've been giving vaccines because of the difficulty in trying to get as many people vaccinated with COVID-19 vaccines as possible at one time. The strategies are more along the lines of, many people at once getting the COVID-19 vaccine, but they may need other routine vaccines that they're going to come in some other day for a well visit, and we need to give them those as well. So we've had, many circumstances now that we've given a COVID vaccine, and then the next day, the day after that, a week later, they need their tetanus shot, their meningitis vaccine, their HPV vaccine, and we can give those without really needing to take into consideration when they've had that COVID vaccine.
And that's changed though, right? Because I remember at the beginning when vaccines were available, they said, make sure you haven't received any shot within 14 days of that. So that's new information that's come out since they first released the vaccine.
Yes, that came out relatively early on, though. By the time it was announced for the 12 to 16-year-olds, we already had that information and guidance from the FDA and the CDC that we could go ahead and give it no matter what the timing was. So that was, before summer, we were already doing that.
And for those who are just joining, I want to just kind of catch you up to where we're at. So we're talking about the big headline today that came out, Pfizer saying in its part 2 of 3 phases of its trial for kids 5 to 11 years old that the vaccine is safe and showing promising results with antibodies in kids in that age group. Now, this is just part of the trial. They haven't published their study yet or submitted it to the FDA. And of course, as Dr. Fox said, once that's done, it could take a few weeks for that to get emergency use authorization. But she predicts that by October, by Halloween, we may see that vaccine available for those in the 5 to 11 age group. Now, please go ahead and ask your questions. My next question was, we've been hearing a lot about Pfizer producing these vaccines for younger kids. What about Moderna and the Janssen, pharmaceutical company? Are they on track to having any trials for younger kids as well?
They have their own clinical trials that they've been doing, but I don't know, enough about where they are with any of them. We get the information pretty much like everybody does, as it comes directly from one of the pharmaceutical companies as they release it, as Pfizer did today. So, we don't really know the inner workings of what's going on with Moderna or J&J at this point. I'm pretty sure clinical trials have been going on.
Yeah, I know for sure for Moderna, I think they started their trials in August for the 6 to 11 age group. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious as to whether, in your medical expertise, there's been any new information as to why there hasn't been some approval for Moderna for the 12 to 17, because we're relying on Pfizer for that approval.
Well, this is, just a testament to anyone who is concerned about these vaccines being rushed and the process being rushed. The clinical trials are, quite intense, what they have to go through in order to generate the data that they need to be able to even submit it for emergency use authorization. And then for sure to be FDA approved, as the Pfizer has become FDA approved for the 16 and older. So again, it's a testament to show the way that our, FDA, and not all countries are as strict, but ours is quite strict, before that they'll even consider any of the data to move forward with even an emergency use authorization.
And I just want to acknowledge the comment that just popped up briefly on the screen from Steve, talking about getting children the vaccine under 12 and saying that the trials have not been studied long enough. Dr. Fox, are you finding that a lot of parents have vaccine hesitancy? What's their concern? Mainly the fact that this vaccine hasn't been around that long for children or been studied long enough. What do you hear from parents, and how do you address those concerns?
Yes, and that's been a concern, and understandably so, right? I mean, anything new, we worry, especially as parents making that decision to, give our child something that maybe hasn't been out long enough to really know the, potential, as people question, long-term effects. But, when you think about now at this point, since January, really December of last year, how many doses have been given worldwide of the Pfizer vaccine in particular. Our own country, over 350 million doses that have been given. And we're really not seeing any, at this point, long-term effects. So that was in December. We're 9 months out. We would expect really any effects to be within 2 or 3 months after the vaccine is given. And the only effect is it's preventing hospitalization and death from COVID-19, which is what we wanted. It's the goal of any vaccine. So now extrapolating that into all the doses that have been given to the 12 and older, again, we're all kind of the guinea pigs. We're living data at this point that's being collected. And the, added doses now for the younger age group, the 12 and older, 12 to 15-year-olds, and still showing that it's effective and that it's safe, not causing any longer term effects. Vaccines, as far as long-term, say, 5 years from now effects, that's just not how vaccines work. When you think about what a vaccine is, and I think that's, sometimes where it can be a little confusing, because we think of vaccines as drugs, something that we're putting in our body that is not a natural substance. But vaccines are not a chemical that your body is processing through the liver and, the kidneys. It's simply just a way to present something that the body will know to recognize the actual virus. So in this case, the protein, the spike protein that's from the COVID-19 virus. A vaccine is just packaging this spike protein to give to our bodies so that our bodies can develop immunity against it. It's novel. It's never been out there. None of us have immunity. It's just giving us immunity. So for there to be, any reason that we would even think that there would be long-term consequences of the vaccine that, again, might affect your kidney or your liver. It's just not the way that vaccines, really are processed in the body that, we would think that would happen.
And, Dr. Fox, another question that a lot of parents have as well is, what kind of reactions will my child in that, 5 to 11-year-old age group have when they get the shot? Is it very similar to how adults feel, like the sore arm after the first shot, maybe some illness after the second, or vice versa, depending on the vaccine?
From the data from Pfizer this morning, from what I understand it to be, is yes, it's very similar to what we've seen with that in our, pediatric practice, the 12 to 21-year-olds that have gotten it, that it's, very much that immune response, your body doing its job, recognizing something foreign, being that spike protein, developing immunity against it with that, elevation of temperature. So your fever and, maybe chills and soreness at the site where your body is kind of fighting with the white blood cells to have then your memory white cells to, recognize it in the future. Lymph nodes sometimes are enlarged on the side that the vaccine was given. So if you got it in your right arm, then on the right side, you may have lymph nodes enlarged in your under your underarm or in your neck. Rash is unusual. And, I have to say that in our patient population, we've given, well over 2,000 doses now. And we haven't really seen many of those side effects as on that whole basis. Like, yes, there are some kids that have had it, but kids seem to really tolerate this better than, honestly, some of the adults who, from their parents, sometimes we hear quite extreme reactions they've had
to the vaccine. Yeah. And I want to address this question real quick, because that there is no virus in the shot, right? I mean, you can talk about that, Dr. Fox.
It's a killed vaccine. So you have live vaccines, killed vaccines. Live vaccines is when we have the actual virus within the vaccine itself. Measles, mumps, rubella, the MMR, chickenpox, Varivax. Those are 2 live vaccines. We are injecting small doses of measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox into your child. This is a killed vaccine, very much like all the other vaccines that we our routine vaccines that we administer. That is just the actual protein and not COVID-19 virus itself that we're injecting.
This is a protein that is mimicking the virus. So it's not killed, it's not dormant. This is right. This is a protein of the virus, so that your body learns how to react to that protein of the virus.
Exactly. It's not a living vaccine. We're not giving anybody COVID-19 with the vaccine.
And you've obviously treated many children who have come into your practice sick with COVID. Especially in August, we saw a huge peak of children under 12, under 17, really, who showed COVID-19 symptoms. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, children were not really a concern. They were not getting as ill as adults were. Many of them were asymptomatic. Have you seen a shift in that with the Delta variant? What is your concern as more children are obviously back in school and face to face?
Yes, we've seen a huge increase in the pediatric population being not only getting sick with symptoms, but then being contagious, which we in the past year and a half were really kind of spared with our patient population, because even if family members had COVID-19, a lot of times the younger kids didn't get it, or if they got it, they weren't as likely to spread it to others. Where now it seems to be much more contagious in that, we've had babies with it. I mean, it's Delta just doesn't really, it is pretty much anybody is fair game for Delta, it seems. So, that's our concern. And that's what the push for the vaccination is, to make sure that we try to protect our community as much as possible. Because after Delta, who knows if there'll be something else that we'll have to deal with. So at least for all of us to be vaccinated with the vaccines that we know do fight to prevent hospitalizations and deaths.
Now, and I have a question about that, since you mentioned Delta. Obviously, that's the strongest strain that we're dealing with right now, at least the most contagious one. When the vaccine came out for adults, the vaccine trials were not tested among variants, definitely not, with Delta in the mix. Now, with these vaccine trials among children, are these vaccines supposed to be more protective against Delta because they are being tried in a time where we do have spread with the Delta variant?
Yes, I mean, that's a great point, that they're testing the efficacy during the time that these kids are being exposed to Delta. So yes, I mean, I would assume, but we know that from even the 12 and older, that the vaccine is effective against Delta. Again, the issue with viruses is they kind of do their own thing. And so it's hard to know where we're going after this. That's why it's so important to try to stomp it out while we can, and have as many people vaccinated now for what we know is, a vaccine that effectively can keep you from getting very sick from COVID-19 before we develop another variant from people who are not being immunized, who are not getting the vaccine. And then it becomes something that the vaccine isn't working, and then we have to do something about. So this is really, time is of the essence. It's critical now for anybody who's been kind of on the fence about getting the vaccine for themselves and their 12 and older children, that this is really the time that we as a community all need to try to band together and do this to really finally hope to stomp this out.
I just want to address the question on the screen right now. Lorraine is asking, isn't the vaccine for the original COVID-19, not the Delta variant?
Exactly. Yes, it's the vaccine is for COVID-19. The variants are things that are going to change over time. And we've just now, seen that this happens, that we thought that everything was good back in June, and then Delta arrived. And so the vaccine is just effective against the initial variant. Now Delta, it does also seem to be effective. And so the point being is that herd immunity, getting as many of us vaccinated as possible so that we aren't continuing to breed this coronavirus variants that potentially could be not effective, or our vaccine could be not effective against.
Another question that a lot of parents bring up is natural immunity. Their kids had COVID and went through COVID. Are you seeing that those children who have gone through the virus are seeing lower rates of reinfection than those who are getting infected for the first time? I mean, does natural immunity help or play a role in any way for you to be protected against COVID?
Yes, I mean, of course, our natural immunity is going to help us. We just don't know for how long. So that's, why the vaccine is still recommended for anybody who has had COVID-19. Anyone 12 and older who has had COVID-19 should still get the vaccine, because there isn't really any that knowledge of, when will be that time that your natural immunity is going to decrease and you're going to be more at risk of getting COVID-19 again, especially with the different variants that are potentially on the horizon. So yes, getting vaccinated, even if you've had COVID-19, even if you test your antibody level and you see that you have antibodies, because we really don't know, again, how long that's going to be there, how long those natural antibodies are going to be there. Whereas for the vaccine, because of the clinical trials, these antibodies are being tested in the people who are part of the clinical trials long term. And we see this with vaccines a lot, that, initially only one dose is recommended. This happened with measles, mumps, rubella. And then and chickenpox too, after 10 or 15 years, they realize that titers are going down, dropping. The immunity that you've developed to these vaccines is decreasing, and so they recommend a booster dose. So again, this is part of the long-term clinical trials that will be going on, monitoring the subjects of the clinical trials.
And I'm curious as well, Dr. Fox, since this whole COVID-19 vaccine came out, and there's obviously been a lot of controversy from people who are for it and who are against it, have you seen any parents have general vaccine hesitancy towards other vaccines since this, COVID kind of took the stage and is on the spotlight right now? Or are you still seeing that parents are still trying to get their kids vaccinated for other illnesses?
The interesting thing that, many of us realized over the summer is, over the summer we do our typical kindergarten and 7th grade checkups that the kids need their shots before they can enter kindergarten or 7th grade. And in the past, we, especially the 7th graders that need the Gardasil, which is the HPV vaccine, a lot of discussion about them, and people, really question whether they needed it and what are the side effects, and they're uncomfortable with it. Well, now COVID-19 kind of took the place of that. So those people were now more likely to just say, okay, give the HPV and the tetanus, but not the COVID-19. But here's the problem. We don't have a pandemic right now of human papillomavirus or of tetanus. We have a pandemic of COVID-19. So that's really the vaccine. If you're really on the fence about, I don't want to give my child, too many vaccines at once, it's not the tetanus and the HPV that you should be deciding to give. It's the COVID-19. So this is really important, that the COVID-19 vaccine is what everybody needs to be getting now because of the pandemic. So, while yes, we're here, we answer questions all the time about vaccines, and we understand parents' hesitancy and understand, how there is misinformation, and that's, something that unfortunately, again, can easily sway people. But just the suggestion always from, my practice is just trust your doctor and, listen to what they have to say. If you have questions, try to understand that we are the experts. We are the ones giving vaccines for many different things all the time. We understand how vaccines work. If we feel comfortable with the vaccine for your child, then try to trust that recommendation. I use the analogy all the time with my patients that, if there's a fire in your house, the firemen come and you don't question how they put out the fire, how they save your children. So that's the thing to try to remember, is that, this is because it's so much under this microscope, that what we're trying to recommend is getting really distorted. And again, so important to get that COVID-19 vaccine. And please ask us questions, make appointments specifically to talk about it with your doctor if you're still concerned, because now is the time. Now is the time.
And at the same token, are you seeing parents that are eager to find out when the vaccines will be available for their children, for their age group, those who are worried, and they may have children in their household that are already vaccinated and are of age, but the little ones are not there yet?
Yes, we're absolutely seeing people that are eager to get the vaccine. But those people for the 12 and older were, in line to get it back in May when it was approved. So now we're seeing more of the people who have been hesitant and waiting to see us, to talk to us about what our recommendation is. And for the younger children, we get questions all the time about, when do we think the vaccine is going to be available? When it's available, will they be able to get it from us? The great thing is the schools are now giving the vaccine at select schools, at certain schedule they have. So, there's always that possibility that will be a part of the rollout with the older or the younger kids as well. Because again, that will be a lot of kids that will become eligible if it does become approved as an emergency use authorization by the FDA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Fox. I really appreciate your time and answering some questions for us. Thank you for everybody who participated and asked questions, who commented. We respect all your opinions, so we appreciate your time. And we'll have more on this today on our newscast at 5 and 6 o'clock on Channel 5. Thank you again, Dr. Fox. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.